UK cinema history, The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, directed by Michael Powell and Emeric Pressburger. Hello, hello. Welcome to The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, a movie without any blimps or death, really, or and there, yeah, there's no Colonel Blimp, and nobody dies. But other than that, the title's right. The and part. Anyway, hello, Leonard. Leonard, this was your choice today, wasn't it?
Yeah, I believe so. Can you hear me well? I'm using Club Deck for the first time, so if something isn't working, it's probably because, I don't know what I'm doing.
I can hear you just fine. I'm just gonna give you all mod powers while we wait on Yassi. So give me just a moment to do that.
Yeah,
Oh,
sounds
I can
great.
see Hi and Morgan are here. Hi and Morgan, uh, for two different reasons, have some of the best voices on Clubhouse. That Hi just got this kind of soothing, and Morgan has the British elegance. I just love hearing them. So I'm going to invite them to speak. Even if you have nothing to say, I just like your voices. Hey, there's my co-host.
Hey. Hi, Leonard. Hi, Daniel.
Hello. How are you doing?
Hey, Morgan.
All right. Yes, he entertained the crowd while I ping people and invite people to speak and all of that good type of stuff. Tell him that joke you know. How's
Excuse
how's
me?
how's my microphone, by the way? I'm out in the backyard again. You know what? I'm not gonna ping people. Everyone knows about this room. If they're not here, it's because they don't want to be. I just thought about that. Gosh darn it! If they miss it, it's their loss. Yeah. Anyway. Hey, welcome to UK cinema history. Like I said, this was Leonard's choice, Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, over in on our I would call them our sister podcast or our sister clubhouse understanding movies. Is that's fair, isn't it, Daniel?
That sounds fair to me. Yeah, I think of us as siblings or something like that.
Step siblings, anyway. But
Hey,
Uh, today, we got into a territorial dispute because Leonard had suggested Life of Death of Colonel Blimp, and I went full Walter White and said, "Stay out of my territory. That's a British movie," and so we're doing it here. So there we go. But Saturday at 1 o'clock, we're going to be doing Shop Around the Corner over there. Leonard's leading that conversation because of his great love of Lubitsch, and I've got to tell you, we watched Angel last week, and it reminded me of what I love about these rooms, which is that there was a part of me that had thought that he'd seen this film and realized that number one, I hadn't, and number two, that I had missed one of the great films in history. And I don't think I ever would have seen it if it weren't for this. And I think my life is actually a little bit better than it was before because I experienced Angel for the first time. And I decided, you know what? That is now my goal for this room to have somebody see a movie and have that experience because it was so wonderful for me. So that's our new thesis. Let me spread some mods around just so that if there's any crashing situation or whatever, the room doesn't go with us or admins. And I'm going to let Yazzie do the introduction, and then we'll do a once around. Anybody in the audience, if you haven't seen the film, that doesn't matter. If you have something to say, go ahead and say it as long as it's on topic. And we just use the regular hand raising here. And the other rule is that interrupting is not only allowed, it's actually encouraged. Do not let us go. Keep going. We will go forever. So those are our rules. So, here, let me get the admins around, and Yazzie, give us your introduction to Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. Hint, hint, hint. Manifesto.
First of all, send Sila up. Invite Sila. I'm not going to start. Like, let everyone else talk. Leonard, it was his suggestion. Go ahead. Hey.
Good afternoon, good morning to
Hi,
everyone.
Sila.
Hey, hi Sila. Hi everyone.
Hello.
Alan Rubin over here is a friend of mine. We go to the same university, and I invited him over because we watched the film together in the cinema, which I think was a great experience. So maybe we can hear his thoughts on it too.
Yeah, nice to meet you all. Looking forward to hearing everybody's thoughts.
Yeah, well, welcome, Alan. Thank you very much. We appreciate you coming here, and are going to really look forward to your insights. Normally, we kind of start with like a history behind a film before we do a once around. But because we've got understanding movies here with Leonard and Daniel, I think we're going to go start with their format and just do a once around, keep it under like 5 minutes because we're gonna go back. Don't worry, it's not your only chance to speak. We're gonna get back to all of you as we start to talk about. This is a curated show, so we're gonna talk about different subjects and get people's opinions, but just overall impressions and things like that. So and since this was Leonard's suggestion, I'm gonna let Leonard lead it off.
Yeah, sure. So I've watched the film 3 times now, and it's kind of become one of my favorite films. I liked it more and more the more I watched it, so that's very nice, I think. The last time it was in the cinema, and that was very fantastic. We had an introduction by Kevin MacDonald, who is a film director and also the grandson of Emeric Pressburger, so he kind of gave a speech and some analysis on the film, which I hope I will be able to recite some of that throughout this room. Although I've probably forgotten quite a bit of it, so we'll see how good that is. And there are quite a few aspects of the film that really fascinate me. I think the thing that makes the film really stand out is the way it's kind of two films in one, because on the one hand we have kind of this forward motion of progress. We see these people grow older over 40 years and how everything gets more modern. And on the other hand, we have the kind of wanting to go back to the past. So the main character, he like Clyde Candy, he kind of really wants to. He really likes this nostalgic elements of the past, and obviously always kind of tries to seek that same woman. So so we've kind of got this forward motion and this backward motion in the same time, and it kind of creates a bit of a conflict, which I think works incredibly well. Apart from that, the film is also very comedic, especially in the cinema. I noticed how funny it was because I don't usually, I've mentioned this before, I don't really laugh at movies, but in the cinema when people laugh around you, it's, you notice how funny something actually is. My favorite moment is probably when Clyde is showing his friend, what was his name? Theo Kretschmer Schuldorf, the picture of his wife, and then he put it up in this room with all those animal heads. And then Theo, you can see him framed in the middle of this room, and everywhere around him there are these animals. And he's like, "What a weird place to hang this picture." It's an incredibly funny moment, I think. But there are loads of little nice moments. The little discussions on Sherlock Holmes we have in the beginning, and some other things. Later on I'll recite some analysis, hopefully on what Kevin MacDonald told us, and also I've done a bit of analysis myself, but nothing too detailed, to be honest. So I'll get into that later. So I guess we can just go around now. Daniel, do you want to go ahead?
Well, okay, I can try. I've got to admit that I'm not operating on all cylinders today. I was up all night, and then I plowed through this movie this morning, which wasn't easy, so long, and I was sleepy. But now here I am, and I'm even more sleepy. But I'll try to get. I was
You
afraid that I
see,
wouldn't be.
Leonard, people do stay awake for movies if they have enough willpower. And unlike Leonard.
Yes, yes. It was an act of willpower. That's about all that got me through it. A little bit of coffee too. But on reflection, I do have something to say. I don't know. Um, I've only seen this twice now, and the two viewings are about 30 years apart. So um, it's really like a virgin viewing for me. But it does occur to me that the filmmakers faced a problem here, and it wasn't an easy thing to do. And this only occurs to me because I know Black Narcissus so well. I've seen Black Narcissus many times, and I feel I have a handle on that. But what they were doing in Black Narcissus was to uh, the movie is to me about the exit from colonialism. The British were leaving India. In fact, that same year, it was made before India's independence, but the independence of India at the time was a foregone conclusion. The movie is not making a case that we have to get out of India that is already established. What it's trying to do is tell people that it's all right, to soften the blow, not only with respect to India, but with respect to the loss of empire, to make it more palatable to the British. So they can watch this movie in England and feel that after all, it's a good thing that they're leaving, that it just doesn't make sense to stay. And there's something similar going on, I think, in Colonel Blimp, which is they're threading a needle, trying to soften people's attitudes in a certain way that's necessary for the moment. The movie's made 1943. World War II has already been going on for several years, and it's obviously the nation is committed to it at this point. But the difficulty here is the clash of generations. That the older generation, which I suppose I don't know, it probably still held onto some of the reins of power in 1943. But the older generation had proved itself a little bit naive about fascism, about Hitler, and spent many years trying to appease him, and didn't work. And yeah, they're not fully responsible for England getting into the mess they were in, but they could have done better. And the movie is trying to negotiate the different attitudes between the generations, and it's tricky for one thing, not only because you're trying to negotiate something very complex, change and work with people's attitudes, but also because in favoring the younger generation, it has to avoid being an edible statement, meaning that usually when the younger generation wants to cast off the older generation, there's a kind of odor of what Freud would call edible rebellion. That is the tendency for a little boy to want to get rid of daddy, and that's not the right way to do it. And the way that the movie works around that is it pays the maximum possible respect to the older generation. After all, it makes Colonel Blimp, or whatever his real name is. I don't know why he's called Colonel Blimp. I gather that he's a character from some existing novel, or who knows. Someone can fill me in on that.
He's
I
from a
didn't
comic
research.
strip. So
Yes.
Okay.
Colonel Blimp is a British comic strip of this chap, and he basically looks like Clive Candy when he's in the steam room at the beginning. So kind of with a mustache and everything, and just very stereotypically British. So they named it after that.
Okay, that makes sense. I even wondered whether it might be a comic strip because it is kind of comical, and the way that the opening credits suggested that to me. But yeah, so okay, it's a comic book character. But it pays maximum possible respect to the older generation, main character, and it shows everything more or less through his eyes. And he is a noble character, and yes, by the end of the film, you can see how somebody in his position would be a little bit naive about war, about that the world has changed and he has to yield to the younger generation. So it does that without being without intergenerational rancor. It's just matter of fact about it.
Well, but Daniel, we're going to get to that because that's going to be part of our discussion. So we'll get back to that part. Just kind of first impressions of the film, or well, fresh impressions of the film that you took away from this viewing.
Okay, yeah.
What you.
It's only Eric that I don't know if I can stay that long. I'm wearing out now, so I just want to get that out there, and that's about all I had to say.
No, that's great. That's great. By the way, this is Colonel Blimp. I changed my profile picture. That's the Colonel Blimp of the comics. And if you go on to my Twitter page, just follow the link on my profile. You'll see I put a bunch of the Colonel Blimp cartoons there because Clubhouse still hasn't figured out how to have us be able to put images yet. One day though. Anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah. Can we move on then, Daniel? Because I do want to get
Please
around
do.
the
Please do.
room.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Morgan, good to see you. Yeah, it's been a while, so that's I guess one of the benefits of rescheduling off of Sunday is we get our European friends when we go out schedule. Yeah. So good to see you. Impressions of the film? Have you seen it? What's your history with Powell and Pressburger, etc.?
This is the confession point that I came up simply because you invited me, even if I had nothing to say.
God, that was worth
So
it
I did
though.
actually
God, that voice I tell you, I want to take a nap on your voice right now. I mean, it's just okay. Yeah. Good.
Deeply embarrassing.
Had you heard of the Archers, Powell and Pressburger before this, or are there something
I
that
hadn't,
you're
no,
aware of?
which was one of the reasons why I came along, because I would like to hear about them. But I don't mind spoiling the film on this occasion. So I'm also dancing around doing a Christmas shop. So
spoiler alert! Despite the title, he doesn't die. So
okay. Well, that's good to know.
Yeah. So also no blimps. Well, there's one, but it's like a matte painting. But anyway. Okay, well then we're going to move to Hi. Good to see you, Hi. Thank you for coming. We appreciate you. For those of you who don't know, Hi is a legitimate screenwriter who runs a very good Clubhouse room that I'm going to allow him to plug right now before he goes into his reflections on Colonel Black.
Thank you so much.
Also with an amazing voice, very soothing and amazing voice.
Thank you. So always a great pleasure to be here. Thank you for doing this wonderful room. My house is called Writing to Sell. Please feel encouraged to join it. We've got like 90 replays at this point. It's on hiatus because
Feel free to put a link in the comments, by the way. I don't have an iPhone, so I can't put it up on top, but feel free to link.
Okay, it's Writing to Sell. It's on hiatus right now because of Clubhouse changes. But yeah, we've got like 90 replays, so you can peruse it and see if anything we've done in the past interests you. This is a really complex, layered movie. I've had, I watched it specifically for this room, and I had very contrasting feelings about it. On the one hand, it's clearly a brilliant film. The you know the dialogue is so snappy, like almost a film noir type dialogue. Lot of wit. The timing is amazing. The opening sequence up through the point where Blimp goes in the pool. That's an amazing jazzy music to soldiers on motorcycles in World War II. There's a lot of extraordinary stuff going on there. It's also the choices, really interesting modern choices like the duel. You have this incredible build up to the duel, and when the duel starts, the camera cuts away to snowfall. Um, that kind of thing happens throughout the film. Um, the film, the kind of the thesis of the film in a way is it's the small moments that make a life, not not the big moments. So like it's about a soldier. We don't really see him in combat. We don't see him being a soldier. Um, we see so it's a really interesting technique. Scorsese talks about the influence this movie. Scorsese watches this movie twice a year. He says he gets new things from it each time he watches it. And in Raging Bull, he has a sequence. Buscemi has this big um, build up to the fight scene, and then he has a very short fight scene because to him, in that particular instance, the fight wasn't important. It was everything before and after it. So a lot of really fresh, innovative, fascinating techniques, both in the scripting and in the direction. Um, at the same time, um, and this may be an unpopular view. I'm not knocking the film. I'm just saying I have complex feelings about it. Um, for example, it starts with the Boer War. He gets this letter about this woman saying, "Oh, it's terrible." The newspapers saying these lies about what our wonderful soldiers did in the Boer War. They weren't lies. Those were, at least according to my little bit of research, uh, no, those were true. Over, they put over 100, the British put over 100,000 um, Boer civilians, mostly women and children, into concentration camps. Uh, English people putting them in concentration camps in like around 1899, and over 100,000 Boers, 26,000 of them died. Again, mostly women and children. 26, like a quarter of them died, mostly of starvation and disease. So in her letter, she's saying, these terrible lies this German is spreading about how we were starving people. Well, I mean, it wasn't lies. It may not have been intentional. They had limited resources, but I mean, it was
No,
a
it was intentional.
disaster.
It was intentional. It was, but
Oh,
it was okay because it was the Dutch. You see, the Dutch.
so
But
I mean,
no, I'd like to, and I'd like to follow up on this because this will save us time discussing this later, High. But it was common knowledge that those atrocities had occurred, and so by putting that in the film, they're showing his character, the Candy's character, I think, in that he refuses to believe what everyone pretty much in the world and especially in Britain knew to be true about those atrocities. And so I don't think the film is moralizing that somehow or another that the Germans were wrong, and we'll get in later about the film's feeling about the Germans, but um, But I think it'd be a misread of the film to say that it's actually siding. It's showing Candy's naivete.
I am going to respectfully disagree with you. I understand what you're saying, and I'm not saying there isn't truth to what you're saying overall. But in this specific instance, the film is firmly, I mean, they call the German guy a rat, and then when he goes to Berlin and we meet him, the guy comes across as a rat. And the camera treats him as a rat when Blimp punches him and he goes down, that memorable image. That is the camera saying, this guy is vermin. So, as someone who knew nothing and watched it, I know how the movie made me feel as an audience member, and it made me feel that the German was a rat, and that Deborah Carr was on the side of the angels and was. Blimp may be naive, but we weren't given indication Deborah Carr was naive. So I don't I don't buy your defense there. I think the film, now they may have done
Fair
it for
enough. No,
political.
fair enough. Fair enough. I agree. Okay,
Yeah,
I'm sorry
now
about that. That we
I just they may have done it.
it was worth a digression. It was worth a digression. Go on. I
They may
apologize.
have.
That was
They
but,
may
yeah,
have.
but
I'm not going to. I don't know what what the filmmakers' actual beliefs were. They may have done it to be politically correct because they were under such pressure to not make the film in the first place, because the Home Office, they wanted to get Olivier to play Blimp, but Olivier was a soldier, and the Home Office didn't let him go because they didn't want the film made, because they thought the stereotype of Colonel Blimp was bad for the armed forces, and they didn't want to film popularizing it. And then Churchill thought it was a parody about him because he's kind of heavy too. And so uh, they had all kinds of pressures to not make the film, and they in fact got no cooperation from the military. They had to kind of, I don't know, steal or surreptitiously borrow all those vehicles and uniforms. But God bless them for managing to do that. But they had the opposite of support. And in fact, it was banned. Churchill banned it from being exported to the U.S. for like a year or so. It didn't make it to the U.S. until 1945. Meanwhile, in the UK, it was the third highest grossing film of the year after Casablanca. So it was a huge hit in
and
Britain.
the highest grossing British film.
Yes. And the highest gross, great point.
Although we'll
Yes.
get into that because a lot of that was skullduggery because Arthur Rank owned all the cinemas, and so if you owned a cinema, it was playing Life and Death of Colonel Blimp. But
But,
but
just,
fair or
but
unfair, still it was popular.
But but in terms, just to get through my reservations, I'll try not to be much longer. But um, so you got uh, and I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but I know it's supposed to be funny, and I understand the comedic quality of it. But when those animal heads started appearing on his wall, I was just horrified. Because I do an animal Twitter account, and I mean, it's so he's laughing, but I mean, it's horrific what he did. That they acknowledged,
Most of those are endangered now. I
right,
wonder why.
right. Uh, I mean, they acknowledged to some extent when he puts the painting of his wife on the wall as if she's another trophy he bagged. So, so I mean, it's not totally unself-aware, but I mean, I found it deeply disturbing. Um, and this character, everybody, I when I looked at some comments, everybody's saying, "Oh, this guy is so lovable, and you can't help but love him at the end." Oh my God, I have so many complex issues with the character. So, and the other thing is, the basic theme of a movie is, we British are too nice. We need to be meaner. But I mean, the British Empire didn't get built because they were too nice. I mean, it's just an incredibly deeply disturbing lie that they're telling. There's a difference also between being, caring about doing things right and doing things smart. You can be strategic without being evil. And the line there is not at all clear in the film. And I'm thinking of like a series like Snowfall, where you've got a CIA agent who is selling drugs to finance a war against communism in South America. And he feels it's fine because he's doing it for the greater good. That is, in essence, the kind of thing this movie is arguing for. That's where that line of thinking leads to, is this justification, this realpolitik justification to do anything. So I find the movie, certainly brilliant and a magnificent achievement, but also deeply problematic because I think it's, and God bless it for being complex. But I'm just saying, my personal reaction was was, on the one hand, this is amazing. On the other hand, this is deeply disturbing. I'll shut up now.
Well, that's a perfect summation of, I think, Powell and Pressburger's career.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Brilliant
I just
and
want.
brilliant
I'm
and
so
deeply
sorry.
deeply problematic.
I'm sorry. I just want to say one sentence. Hi. Just think about that scene with the animal heads. Like, think about it as very Hemingway-esque. Just that. Just keep that in mind, and then we come back. Sorry.
Okay. Actually, next, even though the screens rotated, was Alan, and then we'll go to Scylla. Um, welcome, Alan, and again, thank you for joining.
Hello? Sorry, I'm not
No, we
very
can hear
aware
you.
of
We
how to
can hear
use.
you now.
Oh, great, great. So it's just an overview of like my first impressions then?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
that sounds
wonderful. Yeah.
great.
Yeah, I think probably the other people's first impressions have probably changed quite a bit. My first impressions of it. I think when I went to see it for the first time, which was with Leonard and to the BFI, and it was of course prefaced by, I think it was the great nephew or the great grandson of, I believe, Powell or Pressburger, I forget which one, the producer. Um,
Arthur
I think
Pressburger.
yes, and my first impression, I guess, from it was just the I guess almost the excessive Britishness of the movie and the Englishness of the movie, which I think is of course the main thing the main thing that most people take away, especially on the most superficial level, of course, is like a critical analysis of the English character and the right is might, like what you get, I think, at the end um, um, from Colonel Blimp there, sugar from candy at the end of the World War One segment, or through the halfway a bit when the war actually ends. But I think it's more than just the Englishness. I think to me, or just the Englishness to me came out quite strongly. Just I don't know, the humor was quite, and it just because coming from Scotland as well, I study in Scotland along with Leonard. It's almost like this and of course Scots like to take the piss out of English people, of course, quite a bit, and it felt like just the right like the that I think a lot of Scots have of English people, and did feel like very much a caricature, which I guess is the point to a lot of extent when analyzing Blimp. But yeah, overall, it was quite interesting in that very English presence throughout the movie, and I do think that it does appear quite problematic, as has been said about basically this failure to recognize, for starters, the horrible extent of the Boer War. I love there's at one point that it's basically saying they say we have concentration camps in South Africa, which is just, and it's like the incredulity. It's just rather funny the way in which that comes across. And of course, at that point, you do see that they are trying to make sure that it's not completely censored out. Of course, it was, as you've said, Eric, limited in its release. So yeah, it's just very British in that sense, but also that a good critique. But overall, I really loved the movie, and just how the caricatures it does bring along, and the monologues as well are just so powerful, I think, even though they might be to some extent problematic, as has been highlighted.
Great, Alan, and we'll get back to a couple of those subjects. Wait till we get to. I know where I'm going. If you want to deal with Scottish stereotypes in Powell and Pressburger's film, which spoiler alert, we will be doing. I know where we're going, because Powell and Pressburger are, to me, what Michelangelo Antonioni is to Daniel.
You'll laugh, but I watched.
Leonard, you had something.
I watched I Know Where I'm Going twice in the cinema, and you'll really laugh at this, but I almost fell asleep both times. Like, I was very tired both times. But it's an incredible film, and the good thing is I was tired at different moments of the film, so I can kind of piece it together mentally now. So I'll have to watch it the third time though, because I'm not really giving it a fair shot there, am I?
Great movie, horrible theme song is all I'm going to say until we actually do it on the Clubhouse. All right, let's move to Scylla. First of all, Scylla, did you get a chance to see the film? And if so, what are your reflections?
Yes, I got to see it. I saw it yesterday. Like Alan just said, the impressions I hear have changed my first impression. But I guess mostly I would focus on a couple of other points. First of all, when I started watching the movie, I really wondered why I have to see this movie. I was really, I would say, angry. I, I really don't like this type of movie. When I started, my impression was, this is bullshit. This is just slapstick. This is just silliness. And then it just kept developing, and um, I was quite impressed with many aspects. I find the development as a whole from the friendship between these two is very heartwarming. I like that very much. I was quite impressed with Deborah Kerr. I think this is the very first time I see her, and when she starts
Star. It
speaking,
rhymes with star, as we were always reminded by.
yeah, I knew her name. I knew her name, but I might sound like a person who has been watching movies for the last 100 years, but that's not the case. I just started watching movies actually this year with this intensity, so I know a lot of names, but I've never seen them, or many of them. Especially when she speaks fast in this coffee house in Berlin. I think she's just wonderful. I also like very much this. I've lived in England. I've lived in Germany, in Austria, so I'm quite familiar with a lot of little aspects of these cultures. So not only is it very English, but when they present the German part, is very German. I mean, the way when this guy starts translating about the insults that lead to the duel is just really. Of course, I have to think a lot of Monty Python, even though that's way before that. Um, there are so many aspects about the film that I think, although at the beginning I was quite troubled by having to watch this, and then I was watching a movie. I was watching it in a platform where I get to see commercials, and they drive me crazy, really crazy. But the cinematic signatures, if I could call it that way, when they put them in the war, or we're supposed to see them at war, this theatrical type of backdrops, and it has so many things that you keep moving and paying attention to different things, and then without taking attention to that, another completely different thing is developing. And it was a very interesting movie. Unfortunately, is one of those movies that I think need to be watched at least 3 times. But it's not the first time I say that in this room. Um, and I'm very grateful that I see it that way, because at the beginning, the first 10 minutes, I was just saying, this is I cannot watch this until the end, but it was really worth it. So, I actually, when I was watching it, I was thinking, well, I will go to the room because I like these people, and I will just share with them whatever little I am impressed with, and I'll just go there to listen. But it was really worth watching it. Thank you.
Thank you as always, Sila. Dominic, our new friend, we just made him during King Lear. Had a lot of great points on that. Made for a great room. I highly recommend that replay.
I just
Go ahead, Dan.
oh, well, just first of all, hello everybody, and I have to tell you, uh, I, I I love this movie. Uh, I was thinking of something. I think I see it as an epic story, both historically and epic uh, story of one man. I noticed that little play that they went to see was Ulysses, uh, and sort of like they put in this great epic story of Ulysses as he's sitting and watching it. I also like the idea that there's these 3 women, but they're all played by the same actress. Um, and I was wondering if there could be like a feminist view of this, the perspective of the women. But I want to get back to the Boer War thing.
I believe Yassi has a 1,000-word essay on that later. So,
Oh, is that right?
You're in luck.
So the Boer War thing, what struck me is very interesting, because I had done some work on that in my study of apartheid, and there was this great thing called the race for Africa. Germany and England were in great serious combat in their capitalist uh, uh, economies, and everyone was trying to steal as much and lay claim to as much of the minerals of Africa, especially Southern Africa. And De Beers that's when De Beers made his great diamond discoveries, and all that kind of stuff, and Rhodesia, and so there was a huge conflict between the Dutch and the English at the time, and of course apartheid was just created there in 1899, and of course they borrowed the zoning laws from the United States. Um, but I found the epic quality of it to be compelling, and I also found the Technicolor, the quality of the camera work, the clarity of the I don't know what you call it, the guy who handles the focus guy. Uh, all of that sort of skill set is unavoidable, and I wonder if it didn't set some kind of standard for quality other than story, which is also compelling. So those are my initial comments.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. Well, I'm going to turn to Yassi. Yassi's going to kind of introduce the themes that we kind of came up with ahead of time for this, and then she's going to turn to me, and I'm going to kind of put this in a historical background because we do consider ourselves a room about cinema history, not just films. So, Yassi, take it away.
No, I really don't have anything else to add. I just wanted to ask Leonard if you have any links you wanted to put on the chat, please do. And I want to go to Daniel because I don't want to lose him. And if he's falling asleep, let's just wake him up and hear more from him because I'm gonna be here. But yeah, let's.
I'm still here. I don't have all that much more to say. Just in response to Hai, I agree with your qualms, both about the animals and about the sort of whitewashing of Britain's history. On the other hand, I wouldn't say that the stance of this film is that Britain has been necessarily too nice. It might be that might be the stance, but the operative word for me in the circumstance of World War II, where no matter Britain's colonial past, its course of action in World War II was correct. That Nazi Germany is the immediate threat, and it's that they mustn't be nice anymore, but that they mustn't be naive anymore. And even in the dirty colonialism of British history, there was still a kind of idealism in the British mindset that led to a kind of naivety. So I'm certainly not have no wish to justify that. I don't even have a particular wish to defend the film, but the argument in 1943 is important. Sure, it could have been better if they had managed to do it without excusing Britain's behavior in the Boer War. But the important thing is, what are we going to do now? We're facing an enemy that not only Britain needs to defeat, but the world needs Britain to defeat Nazi Germany.
Oh, that's great, Daniel.
Yeah.
I'm gonna defend this film as being both satire and propaganda myself, because I think this is a satire of biopics and also made expressly for the purpose of propaganda. You know, the fact that the Home Guard comes up, that's an advertisement for the Home Guard. The fact that it's a war movie without any battle scenes is because they don't want to depict boys putting their lives on the line at a time when they're trying to recruit boys to put their lives on the line. Again, Hai and I will have to agree to disagree on what the meaning of the concentration camps in South Africa mean in the film. But the fact that, and this is where the satire I think comes in, they even brought up Britain's role in creating the concentration camps. They used the phrase for the first time ever in a film, concentration camp, is interesting. But that this was made as a satire of the old guard, the people who created those concentration camps and yet said, these are the rules and we have to play them. War begins at midnight. And so this film, I think, trod the line between being propaganda but also being satirical. And when we talk about the fact that Winston Churchill actually tried to suppress the film, some of that might have been his ego, because I think he felt like the Colonel Blimp character was based on him. Because if you look at Winston Churchill's experiences, they were in the Boer War. He was at Gallipoli. A lot of the life story that they created for this Colonel Candy, uh, or General Candy, can be found in Winston Churchill's career, and I think it is deviously a satire of his whole generation's not approach to war, but approach to governance. And to me, the central scene is the one that we talked about briefly with High, the dueling scene, where we're set up with all of this ceremony, but of course we don't see the duel. And I think and there is something distinctly comic about all of the ceremony, and on three different occasions, people say, well, why are we still doing this duel then? It's like, well, um, he doesn't believe in dueling, but he's going to do it anyway. That's the old guard. And this is the new guard replacing the old guard, more than it's the idea that, hey, the Germans have, firebomb hospitals. We need to firebomb hospitals. That, I think, is the satire element of this, is the element that, hey, maybe this new guard, isn't going to lead us down the exact right direction anyway. But we are in the middle of a war, and we don't have time for 45-minute meetings on how much the rapiers are going to weigh in a duel. And that I think is the line that this film crosses. But I do want to talk about uh, Powell and Pressburger, because, as I pointed out, for that streak of films that they made between One of Our Aircraft is Missing, and which was in 1942, and The Tales of Hoffman, which was in 1953, I don't think I can think of a European director that had as many films that have impacted my life as much and that I watch as often as Powell and Pressburger. And you have a filmmaker like an Ingmar Bergman, who is extraordinarily prolific, but with that prolificity comes a lot of highs and lows. So you get a Persona one year, you get a Year of the Wolf the next. Well, yeah, actually they were released in the same year. He was releasing two films a year. And so you don't, so while you have a lot of extraordinary work, you don't have 5 straight films from Ingmar Bergman that are all masterpieces, the way I feel you do with Powell and Pressburger. But to put this into its historical spot, when it was being filmed in 1942, when Deborah Carr was a mere 19 years old and dating the director, who was 20 years her senior, Germany was, for all intents and purposes, defeated. And there was an actual feeling that, well, if we could just press it home and convince these people that unconditional surrender is the only way, and that was what we ended up doing. But that the English were at that point in time spinning their wheels in places like Italy and in Africa, when why aren't we just taking it straight to Germany, firebombing Dresden, dropping atom bombs on Japan, and the things that we ended up having to do to end this war. But as far as the war at sea went, in the Battle of Britain, Germany had lost those wars, and because they were a landlocked power, they had basically lost the war at that point. And that's an important point to the propaganda of this film, and the theme of this film, which is not that they were saying the Germans are going to beat us. It was that we are dragging this war out by not just taking it to them and convincing them they need to surrender, because they did not have there was no route for victory at that point. And if anyone's a World War II buff the way that I am, I highly recommend the podcast. We have ways of making you talk with James Holland, who is, of course, a great historian on World War II, and the brother of Tom Holland, the great World War II historian. And time again, it comes up that 1942 was that pivotal year when Germany, had they been offered some form of surrender that wasn't the absolute surrender that we absolutely needed because of their behavior after World War One, would have taken it. And there was another group that said, well, why can't we just give them better terms so that they'll end the war so that we can end this meat grinder? And so that was part of what the propaganda was of this film was against. So it does have to be seen in that historical context. And so that goes back to what Hai was saying, which is that it's both problematic and also brilliant in its depiction of this. Okay, and Yazzie just gave me the 7-minute sign, so I've gone a minute over my time. Gosh darn it, Yazzie, you're too good at your job sometimes. Okay, question for the room: Do you side on this being more propaganda or satire? And anyone can pop off and feel free to start.
No, I suggest.
Well,
Yeah, go ahead. Hi, sorry.
before we get to that, I just wanted to, since you're doing factoids, I wanted to just add a few. First of all, it actually, what I'm reading is it wasn't actually the top British film. The top films in 1943, number one was In Which We Serve, which is also a British film. And two is Casablanca, and this was number three. So it was the second highest, second most successful British film of that year. And just a few interesting little tidbits.
Not to be not to be a pedant, but In Which We Serve was released in April of 1942, and as a matter of fact, most of the crew on In Which We Serve actually worked on Colonel Blimp. So because yeah, but yeah.
But
So
it made, but in terms of movies that made the most money in 1943, In Which We Serve was number one.
Oh, I see
So
what
it
you're
doesn't
saying
matter.
because it was still in theaters. Okay. I see what
Well,
you're
we're
saying.
talking about
Gotcha.
box office in 1943.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
Gotcha.
I
Gotcha.
say if you're going to go
Gotcha.
by when it was released, yeah,
It's a
I could.
1942 film. Yeah. Okay, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, okay. So
My
it depends how
apologies.
you. Yeah, it depends what you define. So we're both right. Okay.
Well, just like Oppenheimer is actually was actually outgrossed by that Avatar sequel this year, even though even though Oppenheimer is gonna be higher than it in the box office ratings. Yeah, I got you.
So just a few interesting little trivia bits, mostly from IMDb. Um, uh, Jack Cardiff was a second unit cameraman when he filmed the animal head sequences, and Michael Powell was so impressed with the job he did. He did a brilliant job, don't get me wrong. That's an amazing, unforgettable sequence from a director point of view. He gave Cardiff his break as a cinematographer on the next film, A Matter of Life and Death, because as a second unit cameraman, he did such an outstanding job with the animal heads. So that was interesting. Also, the idea for this film didn't come from the comic strip by David Lowe, Colonel Blimp. It came from a scene that was cut from their previous film. One of her aircraft is missing, in which an elderly member of the
49th
crew.
parallel. It came from actually 49th parallel. That's a mistold story sometimes. The scene was
Oh,
actually cut out of 49th parallel.
okay. Thank you. An
No,
elderly member of a crew tells a younger one, "You don't know what it's like to be old." And Powell reportedly said that David Lean, who was a film editor on that movie at the time, when they had to remove that scene for time reasons, but he said that would be a good premise for a whole movie. So this movie is in some ways thanks to David Lean. um, and what? This is one of the earliest films to reference The Wizard of Oz. One of the characters says, "We're off to see the wizard." Um, and at the end of the movie, when the camera zooms in on the tapestry, there's a phrase, "Sic transit gloria candy," which translates as, "Thus passes the glory of candy." That's not something I would have been aware of without these trivia things. Oh, and yeah, as you said, fascinating that Michael Powell had an affair with Deborah Carr while they were filming. It lasted about a year, and Powell admits in his autobiography that Kerr was the love of his life. So there's real parallels there with Blimp, who says, to his wife, I'm
I
20
bet
years
Selma
older.
Schumacher didn't read that.
Pardon
Does he
me?
say to his wife?
He says to his wife in the movie, I'm 20 years older than you. Doesn't that bother you? And it sounds like that was the actual real life situation. And when Blimp is saying she was the love of my life, it sounds like Powell is, it's like a direct parallel to the real life situation between Powell and Kerr. Also, in terms of one of the reason you can't dismiss the film in terms of things that bother me is because it has so much, besides the brilliance of it, it's got real integrity. For example, those real life parallels are fascinating, I think. And Pressburger put a lot of the screenwriter, put a lot of his real life feelings, and he's Hungarian, that like that brilliant, that amazing monologue where uh, the German character explains why he wants to be in Britain, the real reason, and the stuff about his kids becoming Nazis. Um, One of the most memorable monologues probably in film history. Um, I think a lot of that was based on Pressburger's real feelings. So there's a lot of realness in the movie, which is why it's, again, for me, a really complicated piece of work. So I just, I didn't respond to it in the kind of um, open-hearted, yes, take me, the way that like Scorsese does, and probably most people do, or just unabashedly love it. I, you know, I couldn't get past uh, um, uh, the issues that I mentioned in terms of just unreservedly loving it, but I recognize that it's brilliant, and it's just one of the most complicated, problematic for me films I've ever seen. But it's extraordinary. I mean, and I'm grateful to you guys for picking it because I wouldn't have seen it otherwise.
Okay, now I'm
I
putting you on
Um,
the spot. I'm
no,
putting you on the spot. Hi,
I'm
propaganda
gonna
or satire? Which one do you side on?
I think it's
I'm gonna
I think it's a really,
Guys, boys,
it's
okay.
because of the complexity of it.
Please. I'm gonna move to Leonard because he had a lot of notes and a lot of things to add, and I think he has the answer to everyone's questions. So, Leonard, please go ahead.
Well, I'll let you down now because I don't have the answers to everybody's questions, and I have a few notes, but I'll do my best. If I had to choose, I would probably choose propaganda, but of course, it is a bit of both. The film's purpose is, in the end, I think, to basically make a case for to make a case. Yeah, the British, they really have to start fighting. So it's a bit similar to what Casablanca is for the United States. So I do think it is a propaganda film, but I think it uses kind of its humor to also kind of not dehumanize the people and the different stances that exist in the political environment. For example, it shows a lot of great aspects of German culture, which is, as I understand, one of the things that Churchill actually hated about this film. If you look at the early scenes of in Germany, it's truly beautiful. A lot of what is being shown there, and also obviously we've got Theo, and his perspective. So the film doesn't try to dehumanize Germans, and so it kind of compares English and German culture a lot, and I think it kind of does that in order to basically reconcile the idea that this is also a war that is being fought by it's a war that's being fought by leaders, and also that the Nazis are the true enemies and not necessarily the Germans per se. So that's why I think it also does, and I think that's where the satire element comes in as well, because it kind of also just kind of uses humor and makes fun of certain outdated and naive stances in England, and but ultimately I would pick propaganda in this case. And I think if you look at the structure of the film, it's actually really interesting because it shows this character Clive, who when he was young is similar to the young chap in the beginning of the film, and then he kind of turns old and he turns into the Colonel Blimp, kind of the Colonel Blimp in the comic strip. So that's why they actually decided at the end to call it that, because Colonel Blimp is kind of a person who's kind of stuck in the past, very much, he likes his Englishness and he's a bit naive. And if you, the last scene changes that, because in the last scene, he does salute to the Home Guard and he accepts that times have to change in order to fight the Nazis. And I think that's kind of the key moment where the film's propaganda starts to hit. And it kind of that's how you leave the audience. And I think it's really effective. And also, if you look at the title of the film, The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, so we see his life, and at the end, Colonel Blimp figuratively dies because the kind of just let's just stick to our tradition, and that kind of aspect of Clive's character kind of dies off at the end. He accepts that we have to use different methods to fight the Nazis. And there are also some other hints that I found really interesting. For example, when he is having his dinner in Germany with Edith, we have there's this waltz that is being played, this beautiful waltz called they call it Die Mühle ging rund und rund, and that's the German title, and it translates to The Mill Went Round and Round. And obviously that refers to, I believe, just kind of how history repeats itself and how the people, when they're young, they get old, and then they kind of want to cling on to, their what was the case 40 years ago. So it kind of that's what it's referring to. But if you notice the title, The Mill Went Round and Round, is in the past tense. So to me, that suggests that it stopped going round and round. And in this case, Clive's the person at the end who breaks the chain and who starts to actually agree with the modern stance. And I think that is an incredibly effective way of, well, not necessarily the title, that is more subliminal aspect that I really like. But that entire way of showing it, the satirical way of showing it, I think is incredibly effective because it also it sympathizes with older generations in England, and it basically makes a case that might actually persuade them as well, that might make them more accepting of more modern techniques as well. So so I would say propaganda. Long story short.
Okay.
Can
Anybody else before I give the correct answer? No, I'm joking. Before I give my opinion.
Yeah, I just want to think here about the propaganda aspect of this. You know, I think it's uh, it's very fascinating. Even like what I was trying to say, that the movie is very problematic, or the animals. And I said, think about it of in a very Hemingway style, that how he used animals and the cruelty toward animals to show, to emphasize some human aspects, something about the cruelty in human, in his human characters. I think that's how I found it. And also the way when movie uses it, like in that great, like with montage, and you know, I really like that with the music that was playing. I think, using this killing animals as a trophy to show up your character, to glorify your character. That's very fast. And about the propaganda, I think it's we can look at it. We can look at it as a study, the same way that we look at Birth of a Nation right now, the same way that we look at Leni Riefenstahl right now. We can study that how in different times in history, movies, how movies kind of whipped up the nations, what was how the cinema, how art can be used to change the masses ideas, and to get, to look into human psyche, and how, the nationalism to rile up people. And that speaks to the power of cinema. And but I think this movie does not do that. But even if we want to think about it as a propaganda, I think we can study it in this way. And that's what makes it very fascinating.
So
Eric,
first of all, I love what Leonard said, especially about the title, because he doesn't die. What's the deal? Why isn't there? It's like Chinatown. Um, so that's wonderfully insightful and beautifully articulated. As to
Well,
Eric's
Colonel Blimp
question,
dies. General Candy doesn't, but Colonel Blimp dies. That is how I've always interpreted it.
that's that's wonderful as well. I love that. That's great. I just wanted to, in response to Eric's question, I I would challenge the question, because my whole point is that this is a very complex film. So to try to pigeonhole it as anything, I think is wrong. And but
That was actually the correct. That was actually the correct answer.
oh, okay.
So you get the prize. That was the correct answer. It's a stupid question. Was the correct answer? Yes,
but
but
the
it's the
other thing,
question that gets asked all the time about this film, which is why I put it out there. It just was a lot more fun for me to do it this way.
okay, that's
And didn't
fine.
we laugh?
That's fine. Yeah, it is. I mean, I didn't want to be that. Uh, I didn't want to be mean, but it is a stupid question. Also, um, every movie should have a premise, and um, you could say so. In a sense, every movie is a propaganda film for its premise, but that premise doesn't have to be political. So the fact that this movie has a clear message doesn't make it a propaganda film. At the same time, they were under such pressure from the War Office to not make the movie. And if Churchill could have banned it from being made, he would have, except they're in a democracy and he couldn't do it. But they were under tremendous pressure. And so I'm sure they made some, I mean, they clearly made some concessions to the War Office. So I mean, again, it's a lot of complexities going on, but it's quite an amazing work of art. And so it's not Birth of a Nation, or it's not a propaganda film in the sense that it's a work of art. And propaganda films are more propaganda than art. This is in no way, this is much, much more art than any sort of propaganda.
And
Well, like for
to add
instance, the
add
fact
to
that
that,
Theo. Oh, go ahead.
no, I just wanted to say that there is a manifesto to Archer, to their company, and the number one in the manifesto, they say, we own allegiance to nobody except the financial interests which provide our money. And to them, the sole
J.
responsibility
Arthur
of
Rank.
ensuring. Yes, excuse me, sorry.
Do I have a bad connection, or I don't hear anybody speaking?
I think nobody's
Oh,
speaking. Yeah.
poop. Sorry, and I was digging in my notes. Okay, well, I'm gonna go with yeah. It's a stupid question because even though it's the one that keeps getting debated about this film, because it is a satire of biopics in a lot of ways. It is a satire of propaganda. Now, the previous film, 49th Parallel, which outside of great P&P lovers like myself is remembered for Laurence Olivier's outrageous Quebecois accent, more than it is as a film, even though I think it's a great film and can be watched just as pure entertainment, was a propaganda film. It was to try and its whole purpose was to get the Americans into the war. That's why they set it in Canada. But it has the one character in it that is a sympathetic German, happens to be played by the same person who played Theo in this, um, and he gives a speech about how the Germans had all come here to make a new life, to get away from people like you. He's talking to a German submarine captain who just assumed that the Germans were going to be a part of the Nazis, and um, that particular character, I think, comes back in this film because not only because it's played by, and I'm having one of those brain burps that you only have on Clubhouse, but um, anyway, because of the fact that they have him portrayed as being what was called at the time during the war a hostile alien, who, which is the same status that Pressburger had in England as a Hungarian refugee who had made films for UFA in Germany before going to France and finally to England to flee the Nazis. He was, and all of the things that they talk about for the hostile aliens that he had to go through in terms of not of curfews and having to get special permits to be in to go to dinners and all of those things Pressburger was going through at the time that they were making this film. And so while that seemed like it was propagandistic as this to say, hey, our fight isn't against the Germans, it's against the Nazis, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, it was also very heartfelt. And the entire relationship, I think, between the Colonel and, at that point, the General Candy and Theo, I think really reflects on the relationship between Powell and Pressburger at that time, in a way, because if you ever see interviews with the two, or I highly recommend, they did an episode of Desert Island Discs together. They had just such great affection for each other, and you can just hear it. And um, and that comes through in the film. Now, whether they deliberately modeled uh, that relationship on their own relationship, or if it's just something that kind of came through, you feel it. And that's not a propagandistic, nor is it satirical. But the tropes that are being satirized here, such as the dueling, such as the the entire fake operation that begins and ends the film, and the uh, uh, Libsy's performance is obviously a satire of the typical British general, what have you. Those are characters that would be played dead serious in a real propaganda film in that manner. And so, where I think this film succeeds is that people are asking that question, because I think it satirizes propaganda so well that people are like, "Is this propaganda?" But let's look at one of the speeches real quick, and I'm also kind of trying to buy time till Yazzy's issues get fixed. But that gets cited most of all by people who want to kind of write this film off as being propaganda. And I actually wrote it down. This was off of the subtitles. Clyde, this is Theo. If you let yourself be defeated by them, the same way they hit you, there won't be any methods but Nazi methods. If you preach the rules of the game while they use every foul and filthy trick against you, they will laugh at you. They will think you are weak, decadent. And if you lose there, if you lose, there won't be a return match next year, perhaps not even for 100 years. And yeah, that does seem like a speech meant to say, hey, they're committing atrocities, so we should commit atrocities. They're bombing hospitals, so we should bomb hospitals, etc. But that line about match, there won't be a match next year, goes to what I think the theme of the satire is, which is that all of these are rules of the game. That this is war, people are losing their lives, and the generals are playing this as if it were a game with rules. And the rules have changed, but Candy is still playing by the old version of these rules. But it is not in any way, shape, or form saying these rules are fair or these rules are good or that this is a good thing. It is actually satirizing the entire concept of viewing this as being a next match. And I turn to a later speech when he said we I'm gonna have to pull up my notes. I don't remember it offhand. But do you remember, Clive? We used to say our army is fighting for our homes, our women, and our children. Now the women are fighting beside the men. The children are trained to shoot. What is left is the home. But what is the home without the women and children? And that to me drove that point home, which is that this is just a game to these generals, where nearly 10% of Europeans lost their lives during this war. I'm going to turn back to Yazzie. I guess she's fixed her technical issues, because Yazzie had an opportunity that the rest of us hopefully haven't. She's actually lived in a totalitarian state that produced real propaganda. And I'd like to have her give some reflections on that.
No, but no. What I wanted to read from the manifesto was about the money aspect of the film, the budget that Hai was talking about. But now that you're I kind of look at this propaganda thing in a totally different way. I think the whole satire aspect of the film is this. Just look at the title. I think what happens here is they kind of take the title. Okay, they kind of robbed the title, stole this character, this familiar character, okay, called the Blimp, and they use it backwards. They say, okay, just, this is the same argument that I met about If. I said, we need to question that what happens to make these people. And this film does this. This film goes over this development of this character. It says, like, okay, this character that that you always make fun of, now look that who and how
this character, this old, boring, this close-minded guy is made. What made this character? And I think that's so interesting. The way that at the end of the film we kind of sympathize with him. We like him. They take us to this journey that we experience life through his eyes. The movie, we see the woman in the film through his eyes, and they all look alike. So, I think especially at the end, with that Rashomon kind of thing at the end, we really sympathize with him, and it speaks to to the propaganda aspect also. I don't know if you guys see it that way or not.
Can I ask, Eric, can you define propaganda here? Because it seems to me that you can look at it, there's a very broad definition, which is anything that tries to influence the audience. And I'm with High on this one. Any movie worth its
That's
salt is
every
going to try
film
to
ever.
influence
That's
people.
every film ever made. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are probably some films that are made without any intention
I go
at
with
all. But
I go with Winston Churchill's definition of propaganda, which is when an Englishman tries to take a good look at something. As a pun. Anyway,
okay.
no.
I have my own definition of propaganda.
Propaganda. Okay.
Don't
I
you think
define
that here they
propaganda
kind of
as
make
being
fun of
state
it?
run.
I think
didn't hear
I'm
that.
sorry,
aspect
Yassi.
is
I
made fun.
talked over you.
No. I'm saying I think the satire here, the dark comedy, the absurdity here is that, like, in another layer of the film, the complexity is that is the thing that they're making fun of. They're making fun of the warfare. They're making fun of the old ways. They're making fun of the why. The now that we're here, in their manifesto, actually, in the Archer manifesto, the first thing that they say is that we own allegiance to nobody except the financial interests which provide our money, and to them the sole responsibility of ensuring them a profit, not a loss. This is number one in Archer. So, and look what happens. I think this contrast in the film, just look at it as the similar movies. Like, look at it as Forrest Gump. What happens in Forrest Gump? What happens in Benjamin Button? What happens to, I don't know, Inglorious Bastards? To kind of war satires movies, the character-driven war movies. Don't you think that, especially in the duel scene, when they take away the result of it, they said it doesn't matter. This war doesn't matter. What we're trying to sell you through this movie doesn't matter. What matters is the human aspect of this, the characters, the people, no matter they're German or they're British. We just want to take, especially today, I think this argument is so, like, resonate with us, because it doesn't matter that which side of the war we are. It's the casualties, the people. I think this movie has this very
Well,
human
before we get
aspect to
back
it.
to the manifesto, let's go back to, because you said something kind of brilliant in terms of what about where our sympathies lie. But I want to return this back to High's point about that's what makes this film problematic for some people, is that that while it is a satire of the old guard, you are meant to feel a loss of something and sentimentalize with the people who are losing it. Um, it is true that I do empathize for Candy, not only at the end of the film, but during his more flustered moments throughout the film. But it's the same way I think that I empathize with Paul Rudd in Our Idiot Brother. Because to me he is a buffoon throughout this, and everything he touches, just like the Paul Rudd character in Our Idiot Brother, turns brown. He creates an international incident.
This was
You
my point
know,
at the very beginning, Eric, that you can sympathize with people without agreeing with them. And that's what I was talking about, threading the needle. It's the same thing he does with Black Narcissus. You can sympathize with the nuns,
well,
but still
I'm gonna
realize they need to get
sharpen
out.
that a little bit. I'm gonna sharpen that a little bit because I used the wrong word. The word I should have used is empathize as opposed to sympathize. I can empathize with him.
What,
I
what's the
don't have
distinction?
any sympathies with his character.
So you mean sympathy is agreement as opposed to
Yeah, I don't
um,
sympathize. I don't feel the loss of something
okay, okay.
great. I don't feel, yeah, but I empathize. I feel badly for him as a character going through this, and as a buffoon who, everything that he touches turns brown. Like I used the Paul Rudd example, but there's a million examples. But I don't look at him the way I look at sympathy. Is Charlie Chaplin's The Tramp, where I am seeing everything from his point of view, and what happens to him is happening to me. Empathy is something more like Buster Keaton, where where I empathize, like, gosh, that's gotta suck, but my sympathies aren't. I'm not seeing things from his point of view, and I don't think you're supposed to here. I think he is supposed to be a someone you laugh at. He's supposed to be an object of ridicule. That is my feeling. Now, I've seen the film maybe 16 times uh, since the first time I saw it in 1985, and so maybe this happens when you watch a film a lot. I'm picking up on things that aren't even there, but that's my feeling on the film.
There's another term that I prefer to use myself. Um, Even though I did smell a lot of propaganda when I was watching, it was in my thoughts. But by the end of the film, and after listening to all you speak, I prefer to think of um, putting things on the table. I wouldn't say analysis, but just throwing in the same playfulness with the comic strip and the title. And when I consider that, as I think it was High who spoke about Pressburger um, putting some of his own experiences as a Hungarian, the Hungarians have a history of abuse. The British, the South Africans, the Dutch, all these people who are mentioned, all these groups that are mentioned, have all been abusive in some point or another. Some until today. The Hungarians are still a difficult group of mentality people. So I find I see it more as a let's put all these bullshit people on the table and address them and just make a fun out of them because we're addressing how stupid we are as humans. It doesn't matter, you know. And then in terms of
That's
the
excellent. That is so good, Stila. And yes, you're right. And I don't
and
think I saw the film that way until you just mentioned that. But yes, you're absolutely correct.
and in
That
terms of
it's
the
satiring us. It's satiring us, not the people in it.
correct,
You're right.
we're just looking at the mirror and say, look at what we're doing. How can we be so stupid? So and then in terms of course, everybody, I'm assuming everybody's expecting this person to die. He doesn't. However, all along the film, I take him seriously. All along the film, I think he's being naive. He's very nice. He's really in love with this woman. I think everybody sees right away that he's in love with this woman and she's in love with him, but nothing happens. So I see him as a very honest person from the beginning. His dynamic, he's naive. He knows a lot, everything. So I take him seriously. The only point where I don't take him seriously is at the end when he kind of looks at the camera like with a wink, saying, this is a joke. That's the only point where he's making fun of the whole thing. And to me, I understand that as his death.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to
I'd
say
like
hi to Vizard. Hi, Vizard. Welcome.
he might have stepped away from his microphone, but we'll get back to him as soon as he's. Oh,
Okay.
there he is.
Hello. I just finished watching the film. I got my time zones wrong, so I just spent some time getting away from it. So finished now. It's quite brilliant. Yes, from that's been said so far, I agree. Thank you for hello. Thank you, Yassi, for putting me up. Oh, let's continue, shall we?
That's one of the great benefits of when we have to reschedule for a weekday is we actually get actual people from the UK for our UK cinema history show.
Exactly.
Normally it's a bunch of Americans going, "Gosh, they talk funny over there." Maybe we should move this to
Next
I would
one,
Thursday.
save the queen.
I would actually agree with what Daniel said earlier about kind of like what the definition of like propaganda is, and that this is kind of similar to Black Narcissus. Because the more I think about it, they actually are quite similar. Because this film isn't, it is, I would entirely agree, it's not like The Birth of a Nation propaganda, where it's just trying to really, really make its case and force it through. It's doing a lot more kind of in a nuanced way, and really, it feels more like its purposes, more just kind of well, it may have multiple purposes, but like this aspect of it at least would be more, to kind of tell the English who like the blimps in England that it's okay what's happening right now, or what we're doing is fine. So and that's kind of similar to like what we see in Black Narcissus, where they're basically telling the English what's happening is okay, rather than trying to make a full-fledged case from the beginning about why the occupation is bad and stuff. So so I would agree that maybe propaganda is the wrong term for this, but uh, yeah. But I think that the film is really trying to do a lot of that, and I really like the point that was raised about the filmmaking mocking us as people. Um, and there definitely is a lot of mockery of the main character, whom we obviously empathize with. Um, so, for example, where we have the scene with all the heads on the wall, where we see years pass. I believe Haya said that this scene feels kind of problematic, because I didn't find it, the way I felt about the scene is I didn't find it problematic in the slightest. I found it really funny, and I think it's funny because they're having all these heads. Oh, well, they're having all these heads, and he's putting them up as if that's a trophy, or as if that's a great thing. But I watch it and I think I don't feel like that at all. I just think he's really full of himself, um, and I don't think it endorses the idea of like shooting or stuff like that at all. Or at least I certainly didn't feel like that while watching the film. I just found the title character to be really full of himself, and um, yeah, and obviously later on he puts his literally he puts his wife up there as well, which is just even
Well,
weirder.
to undercut
Um,
that point, when that montage is done, it cuts to a German helmet and it just says "Hun" before it cuts us to 1918 and World War One. So so it also plays back into that idea that war is just a game to these people. That's just another big game hunt that they can do.
yeah, yeah. um, yeah. Well, Alan, did you want to say something? I believe you unmuted, or is it?
I just had a quick thing to say, and I think it relates quite a bit to what this idea of, and perhaps I don't want to bring in too much of, I guess, political theory into the discussion, but this idea of like just war, I think, plays in quite importantly, of course, to the themes of, oh, you have to wake up and basically you have to understand that we have to fight. But I think also, like, looking at it back, it does seem a bit weird in that way that it might be also a critique, not necessarily of, oh, the British have to wake up in that propaganda sense, but it's almost critiquing the fact that I think these generals like Blimp and I guess the upper class in this time, and of course a lot of the British leadership, military leadership, was of aristocracy even then. I think something that doesn't come across is that these people still think it's just war, but even in World War I and even the Boer War, of course, the Lay's troops, or like even in World War I and World War II specifically, there was already a lot of gruesome, really horrendous acts committed by both the British and the other, and like even it's kind of hinted at, I guess, even if it is seen as propaganda, this idea of the concentration camps and the horrible things that they're doing in the Boer Wars. And it just kind of comes across as a bit like failing to recognize, because even by 1943, I mean, the strategic bombing of cities across Europe was just absolutely devastating. I mean, it's called strategic, but they would basically just demolish a whole rail yard, and basically, if there were a couple houses next to it, it would be, oh well, that happens, and that's too bad, I guess. So it's just almost kind of, in that sense, it almost feels like it's trying to justify perhaps the narrative that might come about of this war that's happening, to justify the narrative of the strategic bombing is necessary, and having a German and coming telling you this is necessary to defeat the Nazis is probably it's quite important and almost necessary in a propaganda sense for the British. And yeah, so that's kind of the end of that idea. But also I think there is that kind of element of critique of these people don't know. Like even in World War One, when he says, "Oh, the right is might," or like he says, "Oh, yeah, well, we won this because we were quite good." The British were still quite gruesome during World War One, and of course, mustard gas and chlorine gas and gas warfare was of course quite used in that war, and there were still lots of atrocious acts committed during World War One.
And his line that often gets misinterpreted, he says, "Up until this point, the Germans have fought with their arms honorably, but with their legs they've gassed people." And that second part is often cut out of the quote, you know. You will find criticisms of this, that Candy is somehow thinking that it was an honorable enemy. But to Alan's point, and I'm going to start with Alan on this. So that scene at the British POW camp, where Theo turns his back on Candy. Is I think the most important scene in the film, because that is your right makes might satirized to a T, where because Candy is so oblivious to the idea that a defeated enemy is not going to embrace him, no matter how far back their friendship is, with open arms. And afterwards, he gives that great speech at dinner. Theo does about the British people are not going to just kind of drop, oh, the war is over and we're all friends now, the way that you as military people can. And of course, this goes back to my theme that war is just a game to these people. But Alan, in terms of what you were talking about, in terms of the use of tactics and that line that right makes might. Don't you think that scene is almost putting kind of at least making us maybe not for the first time in the film, but definitively in the film, not side with Candy in terms of his behavior?
I think it's definitely about the dissonance. I think it's hard to go back, especially I'm not an expert in the Boer War, but I think it's the first time where it becomes quite apparent that there is a clear dissonance, and I think that's also quite seen with the scene where they have rounded up the prisoners of war, the German prisoners of war, and basically they're trying to get information out of them about why were they smuggling, I think, the explosives through. But sorry, just going on that point, because I do want to make sure that I say it right. I found I have the screenplay just next to me here, and I did see. So I think this is quite clearly showing that dissonance that you're talking about, how it's kind of where you see perhaps it's the naivety of Candy, but played to like a greater extent, and it kind of the naivety of him goes from just being like, oh, I'll just punch this German at a bar, to, oh, I'm quite naive about the span and the scale of war. And it says, So I think Murdoch, his buddy, was saying, "Oh, I do, sir. Peace. We can go home. Everybody can go home." And he says, "For me, Murdoch, it means more than that. It means the right is might. After all, the Germans have shelled hospitals, bombed open towns, sunk neutral ships, used poison gas, and we won. Clean fighting, honest soldiering, have won. God bless you, Murdoch." And I do find that quite interesting because, of course, I think even of course, a lot of the audience for this would have probably been men and women who probably were at the front, or at least knew about the stuff that was going on the front, even if it was propaganda. They would have probably known that clean fighting and honest soldiering for a lot of the British public was not the experience of World War One. It was an experience of a slog and of pain and of rationing and of rather horrendous war, and not necessarily clean fighting, as they say. So I do think that there's perhaps an element of dissonance there, which is displayed. I would probably tend to say that it is probably recognized, and it is like it is explicitly done so by Powell and Pressburger.
I want to say two things. One is just in terms of overall, if I was doing a double bill, I would do this movie, and then I would do the Americanization of Emily, because I think that at its core, this movie has the freshness, the vibrancy that it could stand up to that. Americanization of Emily, one of my all-time favorite movies. So that's to say something very positive about this. Also, in terms of complexity, Eric, the scene where you're talking about where Theo turns his back and then he changes his mind and he goes to that dinner. And he doesn't turn his back because he lost. He turns his back because of what he's looking to facing in the future, which is that his prospects to him are almost nil. He doesn't know what he's going to do. He has no skills. There's no plan to employ him or make use of him, and not just him, but all his comrades. It's not that they lost; it's that they have no future. And then he goes to the dinner, and all the English guys are going, uh, you'll be fine. We'll support you. Of course, nothing to worry about. And then later in the film, it turns out that all his fears were more than justified. And that, but it's interesting, in between those scenes, we have a scene of him on the train talking to his friends saying, "Oh, they talking like a scoundrel, like a real villain, saying, they think that they're going to help us and get us back on our feet, and then how those weak idiots then will just be able to basically strike back at them again." So
He
it's
even points out that the newspapers are anti-military, and that's the end of that scene. The newspapers are anti-military, because he's so used to living in a culture, in a military culture, that he doesn't he can't comprehend the idea of peacetime.
But the thing is, because because the promises they made at the dinner weren't lived up to, because they didn't really manage to get Germany back on its feet. That's what caused World War II. If conditions in
In
Germany,
reality, but not in the film. In the film, he actually says later that Germany was given too easy a time between the wars. Theo says, and that they did not crush them the way that they should have once he's left Germany. And he says, and at another time during the interview about his alien status, that it took 8 months for him to leave Germany after Hitler. So that's a long time. He said, well, it took England 5 years. So he does. So Yeah, he says that at one point in the film, but he changes his mind very, very quickly. And when he's going over all of the terrible things that have happened in Germany and how that led to the, he's not blaming England for it at
But
that
yeah,
point.
and
He thinks
that's
that
enough.
we weren't harsh enough.
And that's another whatever thing that makes it. I didn't mention earlier, but my list of things that make it incredibly problematic, that is another major one. That essentially saying, the way to deal with a conquered country is to crush them into dust. But that's actually the opposite. And that is, in fact, not what Churchill did. In fact, they did learn from World War One, and they did make sure to get Germany back on its feet after World War II, so that it wouldn't happen again. So the folks,
Well, let me parse that just a little high, because this is a fascinating digression to go down. What they wanted from World War II, I'm not talking about rebuilding Germany afterwards, but from World War II at that point, which is what they didn't get in World War One. They had an armistice, and so forgetting about the mid war years, and if anybody, there's a great film called Remains of the Day about the German English relationship between the two wars. If anybody's curious about that, it's excellent, and it's an excellent novel as well. But anyway, but forgetting about that, if they had pressed World War One the way we had pressed World War II, he's saying that there never would have been a World War II, and then you can start talking about rebuilding your enemies, etc. But by leaving it in an armistice the way that they are, that is what he's actually that I think is what they're talking about, because of course at that time unconditional surrender was the byword. That, yeah, we've gotten them beaten, the shipping lanes are open, you know the shipping lanes were still closed off in the Pacific, but they'd won the War of the Atlantic, they'd won the Battle of Britain, and most of the fighting was occurring in either Africa or in Italy at that point. And not a single soldier had set foot in Germany or France yet. So, but at that point, Germany was beaten, and so to his specific point, he was saying this is not the time. See, and we're looking from a historical perspective. We know what happened. We know the ending. They didn't know the ending when they were making this film. He's looking at this and saying, okay, you need to drive it home now. This is not a time to start talking about, okay, well, if Hitler resigns, we'll make peace with it. They have to be defeated, and their ability to make war has to end, or else this is just going to continue until the Nazis have taken over all of Europe. That was my take on it, but I'll listen to your rebut.
no, I'm not going to. I'm just going to say, again, in terms of reality, in terms of what we know now, for me, it is another hugely problematic aspect of a film that keeps me from just wholeheartedly embracing it. But yeah, they didn't know. I mean, the filmmaker, but I mean, in 1942, I'm sure that Churchill was thinking, what are we going to do after this World War that's going to make things work out better than after the First World War? So it's not like people weren't thinking about it. I'm just saying, that there. It's one of the one of the most notable, troubling aspects of the movie. But it's a brilliant movie. I
Well,
don't really.
first of all, I want to point out that I agree with you 100%. I just like it. I just like a good argument. I think it makes for a better room when there are two sides to every issue. But and I agree with you. On my first whatever half dozen viewings of this film, that bothered me. It, I'm not saying I've grown numb to it, but didn't bother me this time. And part of it, I think, I know a lot more World War II history than I did uh, before, and so I can kind of put myself more in the filmmaker's shoes. I'm not looking at it from a perspective of, oh no, that's not the way, no, that's not going to work. Um, the way that I was, before. So, but yeah, no, I agree with you. It is problematic.
I put it this way: if you're watching a Disney cartoon, which has an African American character that's portrayed in a very stereotypical way, or even a Warner Brothers cartoon, you know, that's
Basically, any cartoon made before, say, 1965.
yeah, that's highly problematic. And you you can say, well, at the time, blah blah blah. It's still highly problematic, regardless of, so, and it's something that they could at the time have realized, hey, this is really offensive. It wasn't like they were totally blind to it. So, I mean, this is a much broader issue. Basically, so I don't give him a pass on it. I'm just saying, I would just say that is a flaw in the film. But what the reason
Hey,
this is a great,
that's a great transition to the next problematic aspect of the film, which is its portrayal of women. I'm counting one, two, three, four, five. I'm counting 6 dicks here and only 1 vagina. So I'm going to turn to the one vagina on this one. Yazzie, what did you think about Deborah Carr, rhymes with star, playing three different women, and all of them only relating to how they looked to the male characters? What was the male gaze like in this
Before
film?
I go to the women character of the film, I want to let Wizard and Dominic and Leonard and Alan like speak more. Wizard didn't even say anything. Dominic just spoke at the beginning. Guys, come on, chime in.
Oh, thank you. Well, before we move on to the portrayal of women in the film, I wanted to mention if there was so if it was made during 1942, as far as we know, has any of us looked into the making of the film and also the restrictions of the time of what could be talked about in films? Because during the time there were codes where certain things couldn't be mentioned, and where certain films were made, people had to be portrayed in a certain way, in a certain light. Did this film have problems in the writers' room or in getting money from the producers to portray it in such a manner, or was there a pro-British exceptionalism, a anti-German mentality behind it? Because you can sense that, but I was wondering if was that all in the writing properly? It was done on purpose, or was there some trouble in the production of this film when it came to yes, telling a fair story, which is very hard to do in a time of war, I think, regardless of what type of history you're in.
Okay, let's do this. Let's do a once around the room, and if anybody's got anything before we go on to the next subject. I don't want this room to run 3 hours if can all be avoided. We all know what my objections are to long rooms, uh, I do want to make sure everybody gets involved. So, starting with Leonard, reflections on things that we've talked about, because I do understand that it's hard to interrupt people and talk over them. So, I just want to give everybody a platform real quick before we move on.
Wait, I was still speaking about women aspect of it, or just general reflections?
Whatever subject you might have had an idea about and haven't articulated yet.
Okay, yeah, great. I actually still have one note that I wanted to mention. I already mentioned the title of the song "The Mill Went Round and Round" and its meaning in the film. Um, the other very dominant theme song in the film, it's the love theme. It's called "I See You Everywhere," and I really like the fact that they named it that because well, Clive sees the the Edith character everywhere. Obviously, we see her 3 times in the film, um, but it also has a double meaning actually because it's also played in the kind of the quick date that Angela has with what's his name, with Spud, um, in the beginning, or well, in the kind of the we see it twice. Once just in between, it's being cut out, and then at the end of the film. So that's at the bell where the young soldiers are. So you could also interpret it as being, well, Spud will see her everywhere, even when he's in the middle of like a military operation. So kind of the more freewheeling nature of the young people. Um, but obviously, I think the more dominant meaning of this title would be the fact that Clive sees her everywhere. And also, this song it's played several times in the film, and it has two different kind of it comes in two different forms. Once in kind of the old traditional, orchestra form, which is very nice, and that's mostly when it's when it's in the context of Clive and his romance. We hear it then, obviously, because he's of the older generation. And then during the date that Spot has in the bell with Angela, we have a jazz version of the song. So that kind of shows the more modern generation. And then at the very end of the film, when the end credits roll, we hear the jazz version of the song again. So that would kind of reflect how Clive has also kind of transitioned to the more modern mindset, or at least in this one aspect of like, war and military stuff. He's transitioned. So I really like the way this song is used throughout the film. That's what I wanted to say.
And we seem to have had Robert Mitchum's effect on Leonard, on Daniel, and he's finally gone to sleep. I hope we put him to sleep well. So we're going to move on to
Yeah.
High.
Well, Leonard,
And
Leonard, everything you say is golden. Do you have a house
So
on Clubhouse?
do I have what?
Do you run a house on Clubhouse?
Oh, do I run a house? No, unfortunately I don't. I've always attended, or whenever I could, I attend the Understanding Movies rooms. And this is my first time in a different house, and it's very nice too. So I'll have a look around more rooms.
His house is
Okay,
here.
well,
This is his house. The UK cinema actually is his real and true house.
after being here all of once.
I think you're amazing, and I'll make an effort to be in more rooms that you're in. I love everything you said. In terms of
Thank you
what
very
you
much.
just, you're very welcome.
I'd like to reinforce what High said, except when it comes to Hard Hawks.
Okay, in terms of what you
It's an
just
in
said
joke.
about music, in terms of what you just said about music, I think that's a lovely way into thinking about the entire film, which is again David Lean saying, this line, "You don't know what it's like to be old," could be the basis of a film. In one hand, uh, this is about you know. British ideas changing and new ideas. But I mean, in a broader sense, this is really about how we start off young, ready to change the world, ready to fight authority. And then as we get older, we become the authority. And then we have to pass the baton to new young ideas who are willing to shake everything up again. And that transcends British It transcends World War II. It transcends everything. It's a very human story, and that's why this is not propaganda really at all. This is art, because it's really about the human experience of being young, wanting to change the world, and then getting set in your ways. And that's a beautiful story. That's everybody's story, and it's very deep. And the humane way they tell it is awesome. So, but Dave, Leonard, I got that from your talking about music. So again, I really appreciate you and what you bring to these discussions. I'm done.
Before I go to Scylla, I just want to say most of my favorite art is also problematic. So the two aren't mutually exclusive. All right, Scylla. Any thing that you've got before we move on to the feminist view of the male gaze?
Well, I would just add that I found that very interesting how this Deborah Carr at the beginning, she's talking about this what the people are saying, the propaganda they're doing against the British, and that is parallel to a kind of, for those days, a statement about feminism at the coffee house where Candy, I can't remember exactly the word, the discussion. It's not a discussion, it's just a short dialogue they have where she gets upset and said, "You mean a woman is supposed to be just stay at home and not make decisions?" So it was a very interesting mixture in her character that they were trying to portray.
Excellent, excellent. And Sil, I do hope you join us next week because we're going to be doing a reading of all the films that we've done, and you've obviously been our number one contributor. So we're going to be doing it Thursday at 3 o'clock again next week. So if you have plans or whatever, cancel them. If you have to work, call in. If it's with your family, fuck them. Be here. Anyway, Alan.
I'm sorry, I do not like fucking my family.
Okay, I meant screw them. Who cares about them? You can always get another family. What's more important is talking to strangers
Ouch.
on the internet.
Ouch.
Alan.
Where's your Christmas spirit, Talia? Eh?
Yeah, sorry.
Ho,
I
ho,
guess
ho.
to finish off with perhaps an extra comment, maybe on that aspect of women in the movie. I think that, of course, I think the first interaction you really have about this is, of course, the governess. Candy goes to see the governess in Berlin, and there's this interesting interaction where he's kind of rambling on a bit, and then he's a bit flustered, and he says, "So what do you care about politics?" And then of course she says, "Well, of course, because politics affects me, and because I'm losing my job because of your bad foreign policy, basically, and basically making it so that I'm basically not. No one's interested in hiring an English person because." The Germans have been fed all these quote unquote lies about that. So I think there's that interesting connection there, of course, of involvement in politics out of necessity, kind of root politics as root activism there, and that she's kind of, and I think throughout the movie, through all her three characters that Deborah Kerr plays, it is always kind of she takes on a role out of necessity or showing that. I guess a sense of drive, whether it's at the beginning where she, of course, is trying to maintain her job, or whether it's her kind of taking on the role of being a driver because her boyfriend, the second lieutenant, is at war, and she now has to be the driver. And then in the middle, she also is a nurse. So of course, it's showing also, I think, the virtues of women in politics, then as taking care of others in the war, and then also being actively involved within the war as drivers and all the rest. So it's I guess in that sense, it is kind of also propaganda, I guess, in the sense of women have to get into the war effort as well and take an active role, but also with that beginning part as well about politics. But yeah, those are my closing thoughts, I would say.
Excellent, Alan. Not closing thoughts. I'm doing we'll do another once around on closing thoughts after we've had the last discussion. I just wanted to make sure we got everybody involved before I
Can I
turn it
can,
over to
can I
Yassi.
just ask a question? And when you're talking about that, I find that curious how beyond the aspect of artistic idea, how is it probably trying to say something about Candy himself, where they put this woman at the beginning, then her sister, who is the same woman, then the nurse, who is the same woman, and then the driver, who is the same woman. So there seems to be something beyond the artistic freedom that they might be wanting to say about this. I think there must be something there to use this woman in 4 different characters.
Tuck that question in your belt because that's going to be our next subject after I let Dominic and Wizard come in because that's all we're going to talk about for at least 7 minutes. And my brief answer is it's an open question. Dominic, you've been uncharacteristically quiet given the whole 2.5 hours I've known you before this.
I'm absorbing the analysis, and I have to just say, I enjoyed the movie, the film. For me, it was, it had entertainment value. It was compelling in terms of my uh, mental interest in the story. A little hard to follow, I have to say. It wasn't as smooth. The epic form, I think. I like the analogy to Ulysses that was made in the film. That it's looked at from the perspective of the general. It's a compelling historical story that captures the fall of empire, um, and the complexity of love, the insanity of war, and how careers can be built around it, industrialization, modernity. Um, I also wanted to note that the English prince during World War II, Prince Albert, was German. I thought that was something worth noting. Um, and again, I want to mention that the 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 technical quality, the sound, the lighting, the clarity of the film, uh, easy on the eye, you know. Um, so the technical side of it, uh, I noticed right away, and I wanted to mention that as well. That's all.
Yeah, a wonderful story about the technical side of this. The Technicolor, if you use their stock, they required you to have one of their staff on, and they actually have sent the head of the company's ex-wife, who didn't know what she was doing, and somebody was hired to just kind of distract her because Powell and Pressburger didn't like the way that Technicolor was being used, and it was mostly because Technicolor was saying, "No, you can't use those colors; they won't show up right or whatever." And so that's why this is the first film to really look like this, because before that, all of Technicolor films kind of looked like Gone with the Wind. Okay, and we're gonna finish with Wizard, and then we're gonna have Yazzie lead our last discussion, which is going to be on the male gaze. Wizard, anything that you came across and you wanted to articulate?
I think it's been said quite well by Ye and Dominic, as well as Leonard, and I think it's been put quite well. Very much it was that we're getting a message across that yes, interesting times change everyone, and it's not necessarily about this. Well, maybe you could say it's about the side you're on, but yeah, about the complexities of relationship, friendship, in these during these times of war. I really can't put it anything better. All I wish I was an hour and a half here earlier, but that's my fault. But it's been a pleasure hearing everyone's analysis. So yes, fantastic job, everyone.
And I just, before we go to Yazzie, want to make a programming note. So next week's episode is going to be a reflection on the 16 films that we've done so far to end the year. And my conception of it is, for the films that we liked, sell people on why they should see them. And on the one film that we really didn't like, we're just going to ignore it. So that's why I say 16 instead of 17, because we're just going to pretend Oppenheimer didn't happen. Because it was a terrible mistake, and I own up to it. We just never should have had that room. All right, the floor is yours, Yazzie. I want to point out for the record that Yazzie did like actual research and has notes and stuff. I have the organizational skills of a squirrel, and so these rooms would not exist if it weren't for Yazzie and her constant pestering me to stay on topic, to et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so when she has something to say, it's something that she's researched and put a lot of thought into. And so with that being said, Yazzie, back to my question. The male gaze is existent in all films that aren't directed by women to some extent. How do you reflect on the male gaze of a film that literally has all of its main characters played by the same woman? Take it on.
First of all, I'm going to deny that's not true. I've done nothing. I just did some suggestions. I'm just so happy that everyone joined us here. Thank you, Leonard, for your great suggestion. And that's it. Yeah. I just wanted to say this film before getting to women. This film, I think that we just talked a lot about the history and the war, but this film, the legacy of the film, is so much bigger than all these things that we talked about. And I'm so happy that these like these two filmmakers are back to the conversation because I told Eric before, I said, to me, the human aspect of all his all these two filmmakers movies make them like Herzog, make them like Bergman, and I want them to be the talk, this new talk from their human aspect, especially because of this humor that they include to their films. To me, the woman in this film, we go all these 60s and 70s and even like 2023, the Oppenheimer movie. There's always this sexist, this male gaze. This movie from 1943 would just, the Deborah Kerr is like Peter Sellers in this film. And how, and the casting, when we were talking in Sexy Beast, I said, it's so brilliant when you use casting to tell your story. You use the background of these actors so that they're familiar to us as gangsters, so they don't need to explain the backstory. Here, the casting is the opposite. They're giving us the not very familiar faces, so we get to explore them and we get to grow with them in the film. And this happens exactly with the woman character. We have one actress, and we get to explore all the progress of women and it's so interesting to me because there's a prophecy to it. You see, we get at the beginning, this character has the job of a governess, and then she gets the job of a nurse, and then she gets not even a the job which is typically like what Alan said, and he's not here right now, but the job of a man typically, and the name of a man, which is like the conversation today. And it's kind of the prophecy of the progress that women were going to make after, like, post-war, that I found really interesting. And the way that the flaw of the male character, which is he forgot to see the present, he didn't learn to see the moment, and he had the love and he lost the love, and all his life he realized this, and he likes that he's kind of he's searching for that lost love. And we see it like he saw what that lost love, that lost woman through, now all the other women in the world looks like that lost love to him. And I found it really beautiful and so poetic in this film, that we think that it's all about the satire and comedy and absurdity, but there are this subtle, very, very human side to the story, deeper than Benjamin Button, deeper than all the movie that comes after it. And um I think we need to what we had to do in this film was to analyze each character. I think that the brotherhood, the thing that the friendship, the relationships between people goes beyond borders, goes beyond even during the war. There is this film, the 2001 film No Man's Land by Don Istanovich. I really like to talk about it one day. It's very simple. It's just story of a Bosnian guy and the other from Herzegovina. They just get stuck in a trench. Very, very common trope. So these two are in one trench, and it's like the no man's land, as the name, as the title. And the way that these two have to come together, and that friendship, that chivalry, that, and I think this movie, it's putting the blame on Germans and say, look at us. You were looking for you want the guys like candy. We have one. So what is this war for? Why are we fighting this fight? And that this was all these beautiful things to this film. I think we kind of lost the beauty. We didn't see the beauty of it, and the all the and the visuals. It begins with that colorful tapestry, and it's such a beautiful, and like, I'm so happy Leonard spoke about the music, because they all come together, the sound, the music, and the emotions and all. And I think this is something that the Hollywood is missing today, and even back then. And that's why I want to bring these UK, and Eric actually started it. I think these classics British movies have to come back to the conversation because of this avant-garde kind of look of their filmmakers, and this kind of humanistic aspect of them. Sorry, I talked too much.
Never be sorry for talking, Yazzie. That's what you're here for. We're used to having this room to ourselves because we don't get big audiences for UK cinema history. So it's usually just Yazzie and me. So, but anyway, yeah, that was beautiful, Yazzie. Um, uh, in terms of the male gaze aspect, I'm going to turn to one scene, and I think everyone knows which one it is. And of course, it's when they're looking at the portrait of his wife, and Theo is asked, gosh, doesn't she look exactly like your wife? And Theo has that heartrending moment where he says, I, I, I grew old with her. I had children with her. She does not look the same to me as she looked to you for those 2 weeks in Germany 40 years ago. And uh, and I think it is a very, very poignant scene that, yes, while Deborah Carr is playing all three of these characters, they are distinct characters. Each one is not some reflection of the other. I think the most ill-defined character is Candy's wife. Quite honestly, of the ones, obviously the sister's only in one scene, but you do get the idea that she's just not her sister. And that Candy just doesn't see in her what she did, what he did in the governess. But to me, up until that point on first viewing, I had this kind of typical, gosh, weren't people really sexist back then? All women look alike view of the film. Up until that scene where, and I can testify to this. What is that phrase that they use? Put a hat on it, or put a lampshade on it in a screenplay where something's got an obvious flaw, so you point it out. Uh, to me, I think that scene puts everything else in a different perspective. That they're putting a hat on it, so to speak. And it's only then that it dawned on me. Oh my gosh, those are, even though they're all Deborah Carr, those are all distinctly different characters with distinctly different characteristics. And Yazzie had already made this point, but you do see the evolution of women in during this 40-year span in England at that time, uh, through this kind of poetic, realistic mode of having Deborah Carr play all four roles. But I'm gonna open it up to conversation. Um, so that, because I don't want to be the only one with answers, to answer Scylla's question, on what point was the film trying to make with having four roles being played by Deborah Carr. And I'm going to start with Leonard. Again, this is to
Can I
you,
just
not.
say it wasn't for?
Yes, of course. Hi, this is an interruption friendly room.
It was 3. She did not play her sister. Patricia Tidy played her sister in the theater.
Okay, thank you.
Wikipedia lied to me, which is
No
my fault
kidding.
for using Wikipedia. Which is my fault for, well, no, that's my fault for using Wikipedia. You know what? I'm going to go and edit that right now. Hell, I am. I'm too lazy. Okay. Thank you. Hi. We don't like false information here, which is, by the way, when you have corrections, I encourage everyone to back channel me either here or, because Clubhouse is such a pain in the ass, my Twitter handle is in my profile. Just back channel me, or what used to be called Twitter, now X, with corrections or comments, etc. I've gotten quite a few corrections, because we're not perfect. We make a lot of mistakes here. But the point is that we correct them. Moving on to Leonard. What did you feel was, to answer Sela's question, what was their reasoning behind having Deborah Carr play all, I guess now it's 3 roles? And did you feel a distinct difference between the 3 characters?
Well, I would say, obviously, all the flashbacks were seeing them through Clav's perspective, and he, not necessarily fully, but in part at least, when he was looking for, or when he met the other 2 iterations of the Deborah Kerr character, he was looking for the original one. So I think in that sense it makes sense to cast the same person, because you're watching it through his perspective, and that's what the film is trying to say. And actually, if you think about it, it also makes sense that they would cast a different person for the sister, because he says that he felt like unattached to her or just
Correct. Yes.
felt that she was kind of a bit boring. So I think the casting makes sense in that way. To be honest, I haven't actually thought about that much, so I'll have to do a bit of thinking. But I think that may be the reason why they did that, or maybe part of it.
I think the fact that it's only 3 times instead of 4, for me, doesn't change the fact that he is basically in the film allowed to be with 3 women who are the same. And I was asking myself, does that say something about him and not so much about her? Because especially considering that, as we clearly see, the 2 friends age, but she doesn't.
Well, before I get to High Dominic and Wizard on this question, so do you have an answer to your own question? I guess it would be a first start.
No,
Uh, uh,
I was never a military man, so I don't work that way. I'm just curious, and basically the question or the idea or the thought came um, as I kept listening to the room. I had some thoughts while watching the movie, but not as a question. Just and I just wanted to see what any of you might say about what you think, or
Sorry,
yeah.
can I say something about the woman character? I think it's about the Candy's obsession. You know,
Yes,
he
yes.
keeps seeing this person. Yeah, it's you know it's subjective choice. You know, not objective reality. That's what I think.
Sorry to cut you
did
off,
Yazzie
Yassi.
break up for everyone else, or is that me?
No,
Yes,
Yes,
for me
I,
yes,
too.
you
that
Yes,
did.
that
yeah,
that
yeah.
was it.
But the
I said
interesting,
Yazzie,
that was
move a
it.
No,
little
That
no,
bit
was
and
it.
repeat that, because
No,
I'm sure it was brilliant, but you need to repeat it.
come on. No, I said his choice. It's not about the resemblance. It's about his obsession, and the choice is a subjective choice more than the objective reality. That's it.
Yes, I wanted to add to that that the scene when she's driving the car, when Deborah Kerr's driving, she's now a woman driving the general, and Theo is in the back seat, and she's trying to explain to him why the general hired her to drive, and she makes the light, and she puts her arm like behind the seat and leans back and looks at him, and Theo gets it. She's one. Why did he pick me? I have 700 other girls. And Theo looks at her and goes, "Oh, I know exactly why he picked you." You know, I mean, I get that. I get that. I mean, that's brilliant.
yeah,
So,
but
you know,
there's still 3. I'm sorry. There's still 3 very different relationships. The first one, they have an inner connection. There's no flirtation whatsoever, even though that's the woman he wants. But there's never a spark that they share. We see it from the camera, but they don't really share anything. With his wife, we see more detail, more, they relax on the fireplace and things like that. And then suddenly we have a distanced Debbie Kerr, meaning as a driver, she has no personal, she just works for him. So it's 3 completely different spheres of connection to him that we're seeing in the same person.
yes, yes, that's true.
That is very true. I did want to though. Oh, go ahead.
Real
Your
quick,
turn, Dominic.
real quick. I just want said what I identified with was the romantic chromosome that the men have for the woman, and it's silly, it's insane, it's stupid, you know, but it drives men their entire lives. There's a connection there that the filmmakers recognize in mankind, modern men. Maybe it's ancient men as well. some inexplicable romantic twerk that that get. I'm just glad that they were able to communicate it in the cinema where a viewer can instantly get the humanity of the point. You know, doesn't need intellectual explanation. It's 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 a direct human contact which informs the veracity of the rest of the film. That there is complete honesty in the relationship that the men have to these women. That's the only point I wanted to make. That's what I'm getting, and that's an instant response, not a. It's an emotive response for me.
And that's, I think, what makes this a work of art versus propaganda, is that we have emotives, and maybe, and it's too bad we put Daniel to sleep, because maybe that's the difference between propaganda and art right there. Yeah, Wizard, any reflections on the male gaze in this film?
It's been well put so far. Yes, I would say also it shows that that points of view between obviously men and women, we view things differently, and also it was showing a very a male perspective of what drives these men to keep on going with the war and what drives their friendship. And in the scene where the main character goes to Germany and the bar's playing, and he wants to try and spot out the character who he believes is obviously a rat, and so he tries to obviously annoy him by getting the orchestra playing a song that wound him up. I think there was that small conversation that was discussed about how she's a passionate feminist, and that she has an idea of what women should do and men should do. But it was a simple conversation, nothing more, nothing less. And I think it portrayed it sort of well in a very simple manner, not a non-propaganda sort of way. And then yes, we see the relationships of the women within the film change and show that they've gone from exactly nurses to them being the colonel's driver. And yeah, I think it showed it in a very mature manner. Overall, I don't think it was too sexist as such. It didn't make it the front entirely of the film, but it did mention it, and then it showed it subtly through through certain scenes being played out. So yeah, I think it was covered quite well, and also just shown in a very, as is being said here, in a very human manner. Like the male gaze is being shown. It is a thing, it's not sexist to point out that. So yeah, I thought it was very well put across, even if it was intentional or unintentional, just for the sake of art, and the film was sort of just trying to be sticking views down your neck. So yes, that's all I really have to say. It was done quite well.
One thing, I'm so sorry, I know you're gonna close down the room, but I just thought about the Kurt Vonnegut, the Slaughterhouse-Five, the way that time folds back on itself. And that's also the Slaughterhouse-Five is also a book about war. So, and a book about war includes the time travel and monsters and aliens, and just like here, that it's kind of a little bit surreal, and and
And the bombing of Dresden.
exactly. So, you know, the, the thing that it questions in Slaughterhouse-Five is that if the time folds on itself and we go and we will be able to look at people, I think it's the same thing that happens at the end of this film. I mean, he's standing and he looks at this woman that we see the same actress, but we kind of, what Dominic was trying to say, that I think about the feeling, and this man who wants to change, supposed to change, and he's questioning everything, and you know, it. How do we see people after this, like this life journey, and we look at them? We see, you know, how do we see them? Are they the same people as they were yesterday, or there's someone new? I think the fact that they don't change the woman character, the actress, and that also plays to that, the way that how we see people through time, if the changes, you know.
Well, I think there's the theme in the movie of recurrence, of cycles. So, going from young to middle age to old, and then start again with a new generation. And in a sense, having Deborah play the three characters is it's showing on one hand progression, because the role of women is escalating in the movie. But on the other hand, it's also showing that there is repetition. That you've got you've got certain things that will remain eternal, regardless of the people changing. So and they actually, I would argue, play with that in a kind of poking fun of themselves way, when early on he goes to Berlin and he plays a song to irritate the German guy. And the reason the guy's irritated is because it was the only record they had. And so they kept playing it over and over, to the point where it just maddened him to hear that song
Yeah,
again.
that's terrific. Let's recreate the trauma of this guy being a prisoner of war. Good fun.
But the point is, what what the torture was, that it was the repetition, that he'd heard it over and over, and that's what they're doing with Deborah. They're having us see Deborah over and over. So I would argue, on some level, they're having fun with themselves, and also warning us, hey, repetition can be annoying, but hopefully the way we do repetition in this movie, you will find uh, aesthetically satisfying. Also, in terms of Angela being a driver, how could you resist not having Deborah Carr end up driving a car? So there's that. Uh,
You're not wrong.
and
Well, and it
one
helps.
of
It
just
helps that it's Deborah Carr playing all three roles, because we want to see her. You know, and
well,
and
that's
in the
another
in the
factor,
in the
is if you're having an affair
programming
with an
note.
actor.
Programming note. We'll be seeing Deborah Carr in February when we do The Innocents, and we'll be seeing Roger Livesey in February when we do The Entertainer, where he's actually playing Laurence Olivier's father, Archie Reich's father, despite only being a year younger than Laurence Olivier when they filmed it. He's very good with old age makeup. So we'll be seeing both of these people very soon in our programs.
But going to your
Um,
point, if you're a director who's having an affair with an actress, it's to your benefit to give her as much screen time as possible, because you get to spend more time with her. So there's all
and have
kinds of
you seen
ways to look at it.
what Michael Powell looks like and what Deborah Carr looks like? That relationship is problematic.
Yeah, I mean, I think his yeah, I mean, Blimp marrying his wife
She was
is also
19 years old.
So yeah, that's problematic too. But and you could make I would make an argument, there isn't genuine chemistry to justify the obsession. But so you know, but anyway, um, I'll make one screenwriting note, um, because people might wonder, what was the point of Blimp going to the theater with his sister? because it's really a kind of a nothing scene. Very little happens, and I would say it's actually one of the draggiest points of a film. So why is it there? I would say it's there for a story reason, which is just to point out that what he feels for Deborah is real. It's not just that he's horny, and he was with this woman and then he parted and he started feeling, gee, I wish I could have had sex with her. It's because then he goes with his sister and he feels nothing for his sister. It's a way of establishing this isn't just a hormonal thing, this is something real. And so it's really a kind of a plot point scene to just get establish something that's very important, but is otherwise not very interesting as a scene. I just wanted to mention that.
How that's a good point. I was looking at that very scene and taking away the play that was on stage, Ulysses, and I took that as a hint of the story structure, uh, and how the journey of Ulysses back home, and his idealization of his wife, uh, and that idealization or romanticism is what got him back to home, avoiding all these great problems and whatnot that war had presented him
Yeah,
with.
and both can be correct, Dominic. So, but High's point that it's more that it's there as exposition, and your point about the metaphor are both correct in this. It is metaphor as exposition. I like the scene more than High did, quite honestly, and I love the use of it, but of the Ulysses play.
Oh, don't get me
And
wrong. I'm saying his sitting in the theater with his sister is draggy. There's no real interaction. We don't really get to know his sister. It's like you could put him in the theater for some other reason that didn't involve his sister.
yeah,
So
yeah,
that's
okay,
what I'm
yeah.
saying.
No,
The
no,
Ulysses thing is
it didn't
Ulysses
drag.
is
I guess
separate
it
thing.
didn't drag
I
for
do
me
want
the
to
way it dragged
mention.
for
I
you.
want
Is
to
what I
mention
meant.
about the Ulysses thing. That was a real play. That that was like Hamilton at the time. So that was a real thing. It wasn't something they made up. That was an actual. Ulysses was a big hit at the time. It was historically
That's great. I
accurate
didn't know
that they
that.
would go to see Ulysses.
So I think you're right about the the authenticity that's created in the male psyche. I saw that too as well. I think that's brilliant.
Now, when we talk about the male gaze, and that's a very interesting fixed term, but it's actually very general. But when I consider that this male gaze has to do um, with the superficiality of things, that's the way I would take the term. And with the exception of some points with his real wife, there is no real depth they go into with a particular relationship, except for him and his German friend. They're the ones who even get more, they show more intimacy even before they're about to dwell. They wink at each other. There's something that goes on there. They have shown even more intimacy than when he comes into that situation where he wants to be accepted here, and he supports him. There's a lot more intimacy going on between the two men than between the men and the women, actually, at
Men who
least
have
for the
been at
camera.
war. Yes, yes, yeah. Men who have been at war together. Yeah. Interesting, that male intimacy that you pointed out. It was very interesting. Did you notice that Theo didn't expect anything? He says, "Oh yes, I sent him a letter, but he apparently, and then he walks in the door, you know." But Theo didn't have an expectation from that intimacy, you know, or maybe there was a sense of disappointment, but he was disappointed with life anyway. He was at a very tough point, um, and I just love how a Blimp comes in and just absorbs him, and just says, "Oh," and all the people who are on the judges get that Theo's a good guy. I love that. That was great.
Well, my other favorite bit is that British stiff upper lip bit, when in terms of him and Deborah Carr, where 40 years later he says, "I didn't realize I was in love with her until the train ride home." Which just
Yeah, yeah.
uh, to back to Scylla's original point. I think that's your Monty Python punchline. Right there. Well, we have done it again. We have actually talked about a film, a 2 hour and 45 minute film, longer than the actual film itself.
Great.
I'm gonna
Yes.
turn it.
It was a great conversation. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much.
Well,
Please come back.
I'm gonna
Please
give
come back.
everybody a final chance. If you got anything else to say, now's your chance. I'm gonna do a once around, and then I'm gonna then close
I,
with
I've got a quick question for you.
my normal program notes and quote. Go
I have a
ahead.
quick question. Are there any sort of Oscar-winning technical people on the film? Um, cameramen or makeup dressers. What are they called? Dressers now. Costume
Set designers.
set designers, that kind of thing. Anybody
Not
sort of
for this film, but
historically?
all of them have been nominated for Oscars for. Pressburger won an Oscar for 49th Parallel. Um, the cinematographer has won two Oscars. I can't remember what the films are for, and I'm not going to go Google it because that's cheating. But yeah, this design team that the Powell and Pressburger put together did go on to create most of Lawrence of Arabia was shot by this team, and the set design with all of these people. So yes, in terms of the staff involved, but not for this film because of Winston Churchill's limiting its export. Uh, yeah, and by the time it got to America, they had taken out the beginning and the ending part, and had just done basically the war parts. So it was a mutilated version of the film that was shown in America anyway. And it wasn't actually until 1985 when Martin Scorsese led its restoration that people were actually able to even see this whole film, because it was one of those things where they had to find a negative that was in a vault in, I think it was Argentina or someplace, in order to get a dupe print, and that whole thing. And so this film, yeah, didn't get the awards buzz that it should, but this team did.
But someone
So,
that we have
but
to
that's an
talk about, Jack Cardiff. Jack Cardiff, last year he won the cinematography for All Quiet in the Western Front. Just last year. And Jack Cardiff was the cameraman in this film, was in the crew of cinematography. And they started this career with Powell. And
Well,
they
and he
just,
shot
yeah,
he shot all the rest of their films,
exactly.
even the ones that, even the ones that they did in Australia. So yeah, and he
Yeah,
of
he
course
won last year.
directed Sons and Lovers, and he became a director, directed Sons and Lovers, and a couple of other films that of note. Yeah, and he will come up again and again and again on this show because his name is on pretty much any movie that you want. His name is on any black and white movie that you really you are like, hey, wow, that's really distinctive. That was probably Jack Kirby. So
Yeah, he won the award and
man,
he died. That's what I wanted to say. He just won the
highly
Oscars and
recommend
he
highly recommend the documentary on YouTube. Just Jack Cardiff documentary search about his career. It's by the by. Highly recommend. Any other closing thoughts before I do my programming notes?
Looking,
A last word from Michael Powell himself. He said, The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp is a 100% British film that's photographed by a Frenchman, written by a Hungarian, musical score is a German Jew, director's English, the man who did the costumes was a Czech, and designer was German. The leads included Austrian and Scottish actors. In other words, it was a kind of film that I've always worked on with a mixed crew of every nationality, no frontiers of any kind.
Love that. That's
That's
great.
fucking beautiful.
It's all right. Right? Bingo.
All right. A programming note again. Next Thursday, we're going to be doing a reflection on the films that I'm going to rate them. You know, worst to best of all the films except Oppenheimer that we've covered here. It's designed for people who where these rooms have been designed for people who've seen the film and want to discuss it. It's designed for people who haven't seen the films and might want to find out whether it's worth their time or why they should. And that's going to be the first half. And then the second half, Yassi and I are going to just kind of open up the conversation to, hey, what have you seen this year that you like? Whether it was in the cinema, Yassi wants to talk about Ahsoka, for example. So we're going to have kind of a freewheeling second hour, so that it has a lot of audience participation. Please come in for that because any of you who've run rooms here on Clubhouse know your number one fear is that you're going to set up a room, make a lot of notes, and then nobody's here. And I'm gonna also point out that January is going to be Yazzy's month on this club in this clubhouse room. She is going to be curating all of our films for January, and she is focusing on British sci-fi. So it's going to be British Sci-Fi Month. She has called herself my apprentice for these last 3 months, and I think it's time for her to stop being the apprentice, and I am granting her the rank of Jedi Master starting January 1st. So, congratulations, Yazzie. Here's your lightsaber.
Hip hip, hooray!
I am so not ready for this. I lost my lightsaber.
And I'm going to end with a quote actually from a different work about the same subject, and that is Ishiguro's great novel Remains of the Day, which takes place between the two world wars, and covers a lot of the same issues that this does about the need to appease Germany versus the need to destroy their ability to make war. But it's a quote that went through my head over and over again when I was reflecting about how I felt about the Colonel Blimp character, and it is, what is the point of worrying oneself too much about what one could or could not have done to control the course one's life took? Surely it is enough that the likes of you and I at least try to make our small contribution count for something true and worthy. And if some of us are prepared to sacrifice much in life in order to pursue such aspirations, surely that in itself, whatever the outcome, is cause for pride and content. So, and on that note, I wish you all who celebrate a Merry Christmas or a Happy Monday if you do not. And I hope to see you next Thursday at 3 p.m. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank
Merry
you.
Christmas.
Thank you.
Want to join the conversation? Every Thursday, we record on the Clubhouse app. Just follow the link in the episode description, and you can be a part of our panel.